When you're driven, the need to accomplish a goal is relentless. Hard work and ambition compel you to do whatever's necessary. In my work as a personal injury trial lawyer for 18 years, it's common to meet driven people. Those with drive can have different personalities, careers, or backgrounds, but they possess one common factor. Despite their passions, driven people want to surround and motivate themselves with other driven people. If you want to learn how to overcome obstacles by learning from others, then tune in here. This is the Driven Crowd Podcast. Thank you for tuning in to episode 13 of the Driven Crowd Podcast, fueled by Snelling's Law. I'm your host, Scott Snellings. When running in lawyer networking circles, there's certain types of lawyers that typically have the best war stories. Family lawyers can talk about all the crazy things people do to each other. Personal injury attorneys like myself can talk about all the really weird crashes and nastiness that we deal with on a daily basis. But there's a pinnacle, and that's the criminal lawyer. And today we have with us a criminal defense lawyer, James Whalen. James, welcome to the Driven Crowd Podcast.
Scott, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So let's start off at the beginning. Tell us where you were born, where you grew up.
I was born in a small town in New York, Carmel, New York. It's an hour north of New York City. So we had a lot of folks who lived there, worked in New York City, either on Wall Street, firemen, cops, that type of small town. Class of 350 people. Only 3 schools: middle school, elementary school, middle school, and high school, and that was it. So that's where I grew up.
Awesome. So you're a New York guy.
I'm a New York guy.
A Yankee to us Texans down here.
Right, exactly. But I got here as fast as I could.
There you go. And so where'd you go to school? Where'd you go to college?
College, I ended up at Penn State, home of the Nittany Lions, and started drinking the Kool-Aid early because they won the national championship in '86 when I was a freshman. So I've been a Penn State fan forever. It was a great experience.
All right. You still go to the games?
I try to get up there, but it's harder now because it's farther away. But I need to make a priority of getting there more often. That's for sure.
All right. So you go to undergrad at Penn State. Where'd you go to law school?
SMU.
So you fled the cold down here to Texas.
I did, and it was funny too because I came down to visit SMU, and it was December, 65 degrees and sunny, and I was like, yep, this is the place for me.
Sold.
Plus, I wanted to get as far away from home as possible, but that's a whole nother story.
All right. And I'm assuming we don't want to get into that story,
not
but our childhood does shape us. What are some things that kind of came out of your childhood that have contributed to who you are today?
Well, I think, you go back to why do I do what I do? And I think, as a criminal defense lawyer, one of the things I focus on is fairness. What's fair? And so it never really dawned on me until later in life when you're, doing therapy and doing stuff that you look at it, is my parents got divorced or separated when I was 5 years old. Okay. And so, that's the early 70s. You're the only family that's divorced in town and stuff. And so I think going through that experience, I think as a kid, you're kind of like, okay, well, this doesn't seem fair to me. And so it's trying to make some sense out of something that doesn't seem fair. And so I think now that experience is the reason why I do what I do, is try to make things fair for people charged with crimes the best that I can. And so I think that's the one thing that it shaped me the most. I think it also taught me how to get along with other people. I had 2 older brothers, but you're at dad's house, you're at mom's house. They're different situations, so you have to adapt to the environment that you're there. So, I think there's a lot of experiences that came out of that. I think also, too, I don't know where I learned it, but I'm pretty persistent. It may not be so obvious, but I refuse to accept no as an answer, as the first answer. Especially in what I do. There's got to be a better solution. There's got to be a better resolution. Now, at some point I'll say, hey, okay, enough's enough. But we tried everything to get there. So that had a lot to do, I think, shaped my experience. Plus, also growing up, too, my stepfather was an attorney, and so that had a big impact on me as well. And I think, one of the interesting things, since, as I said, we were in a small town, and when I was in high school, he got 2 major cases. One, we had a murder case. I don't think they had a murder in Putnam County, New York, for 50 years or ever, right? So this is a big deal. And so the courthouse is right next to the high school. So, on your lunch period, you could go off campus. So I was like, okay, what time's the hearing? So I'd leave during lunch, and I'd go up there and sit in the back of the courtroom and watch the hearing, and one of the hearings was on whether or not his client had the mental capacity to give this statement, because he gave a statement confessing to the crime. And eventually he goes to the trial, he gets acquitted, right? And not to get too far down the road, but the interesting thing was there was an alternative suspect, and later on with DNA, they found that guy's DNA matched it. So my stepfather was right on about who the right killer was. And so, but you had somebody that was a grown man, but he had a reading level of 3rd grade and gets manipulated into confessing to a crime he didn't commit. And so that was fascinating in that victory. And then the second case he had involved a school teacher, and I had his wife as a 5th grade teacher, and I knew him, and our classes did stuff. So he gets accused by being inappropriate with his students, okay? And so first there was 1, there was 2, there was 3, there was 4. And I was in the courtroom when they reached the verdict, okay? And so you're sitting there, and the first verdict was not guilty, okay? And then the second one, there was a hung jury. But then eventually it got on a trail, and you kept hearing not guilty, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. And I'm like, I mean, it doesn't get any better, more exciting and being in the middle of this. And so that, really fueled my desire to be a lawyer. One, to be a lawyer, but be a criminal defense lawyer, because, that's where the rubber meets the road, and it was pretty exciting. So,
Did you ever consider doing anything other than criminal defense?
No, I did consider maybe being a prosecutor, but then when I was at SMU, I did the criminal clinic, and the clinic let us represent people in county criminal court number 1. Judge Ben Ellis was the only judge that let the clinic practice in there, and the clinic wouldn't have survived if it wasn't for Ben Ellis. And so I had a DWI case, and so I'm working this thing up for a trial, and I'm trying to get a hold of the client. I can't get a hold of him, right? So I'm driving South Dallas looking for this guy. I had no business being down there. Here I am, this 25-year-old driving, at South Dallas, knows where I'm at, and this is probably not the best place in town. And all of a sudden, he shows up on the day of court. He showed up, and I get, hey, guess what? You're going to trial today, right? So I had never met him. So we go try the case, and not proctor, but associate professor was Mike McCullum. And it was kind of funny because he's sitting there, ask him this, ask him this, ask him this, right? And so you go through the process because you thought you were ready, but when you get in there, you realize I wasn't even close. And,
right.
And for a stroke of luck, God, whatever, they found him not guilty. Okay.
So you were 1-0.
Right. So I'm 1-0, and I should have stopped right then and there, right? So, you win that, and so then you're just like, look, I've always wanted to do this, so let's go do it. Now, when I first came out of law school, I worked at a PI firm for a little bit, but I was like, I don't want to do this, and so got into criminal defense and started my own practice, but then, worked with Burleson Payton Gibson and learned a lot there, and then started my own practice again. And that's kind of really how I got into what I wanted to do. But I had a sense that's where I wanted to be.
And so I think most people that we've talked to on this podcast would certainly classify themselves as persistent people, right? I don't think you get too far in this world if you can't push past no a few times here and there. When did you first kind of sense that was within you? Was it always there? Is that something that you developed over trials and tribulations? When did you first kind of identify that, I am a pretty persistent person?
That's a great question. I think maybe it developed, over time, because I think, I guess what's coming to mind for me is like, when you first start out, practicing law, you're scared to death of making a mistake, right? So you're reading cases, you're doing everything humanly possible to make sure that you get an offer, then you're not sure whether or not that is, so you keep digging some more and stuff. So I think it's within you, but I think you also have to develop. It's a skill that you have to develop. But I think I just, by being in the profession that I was in, I think it developed over time. Because I would tell you, based on my grades in college, I wouldn't say I was persistent. But,
not at that, right?
Not at that.
Studying?
Not at that. But I think over time, because once you grasped the idea that, I'm responsible for this person in some way. Ultimately, they're responsible for themselves. But I think that was kind of the driving force. And also, but I think it also ties back to this fairness issue. that doesn't seem fair to me. That doesn't seem right to me. So let me go back and look to see if there's another way. So I think it's a combination of the two, but that's what I think it's developed. I think we have it in us, but I think it's developed.
I think I would agree with that. I remember being a kid growing up, and I grew up in the '80s, which meant I saw the Karate Kid probably 132 times. And for my 7th birthday present, I got karate lessons. And I remember going in there, and I thought, immediately we were just going to start fighting, right? No, that's not what happens. That's not how it works. You get to learn katas, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is a whole bunch of steps put together, different moves, different defenses, things like that. And I remember I hated it because I couldn't remember them.
Right.
Right. And then I would have to practice and practice and practice until finally I got one. Awesome. You perfected that one. Guess what? You get like 25 more that you get to learn along the way. Oh, and then you start fighting too. And so that makes it better. But I remember thinking, the only way for me to progress through the ranks is to learn these dang things. And then at tournaments, there was a kata competition and a fighting competition. And I had to do both. And so I was like, you know what? If I got to do it, I may as well be the best at it. And so I started practicing. practicing.
Right.
Eventually I got really good at it. And, there would be times when I wouldn't place in the sparring, but I would in the kata, right? And so I think for me, that's kind of a defining moment of seeing myself as persistent, because I remember thinking to myself, this is terrible. Like, this is the last thing on earth I want to go do. But I still went out in the garage, and I still practiced it and got a little bit better. And so when I look at persistent people, typically they have some sort of story like that, or something that they conquered or made it through that proved to themselves, yeah, you know what? This is something that I can apply across my entire life, regardless of what I'm doing, is just this consistency and moving forward in everything that I do.
Yeah, no, I think I think when you bring consistency and self-discipline, I think that's what have been, for me, one of my biggest growth areas. I still need to work on it, because as far
Amen.
as far as discipline, but over time learned routines, whether it's a morning routine and exercising, on a regular basis and stuff like that. I think that's where the results come, is through the consistency and the repetition. It's not as much as, there's times it's like, why isn't this working? But it's like being able to know that, trust that, hey, if I stick with it, there's something good that's going to come out of it, one way or the other.
In several books that I've read, that principle is very prevalent, right? Which is, you look at these really great companies, or you look at really great athletes, or you name it, and they really don't do anything that is extraordinary or super sexy to look at. Mm-hmm. It is showing up day after day, hitting the fundamentals, getting a little bit better, getting a little bit better, getting a little bit better. And then if you bring in the right talent to the organization with the right culture, and you breed that consistency, then, man, that is way down the line into becoming great in whatever you're doing or building or leading.
No, and one of the books that came to mind while you're talking about it is Grit, that by Angela Duckworth. I mean, what a great! I gave it to my children, whether they read it or not, I don't know, but I think one of them did, and I said, here, this is one of these books you need to read, because I think what Grit talked about, and the conclusion she came to, is like, you could be the smartest person in the world, but you got to have some grit, you got to have some persistence, and that's going to equal the playing field or even outweigh the smartest person in the room, because you've got some grit to you. And I think, that's a great book, and I think that really speaks to what you just said. I mean, and so it's the consistency, it's just doing things the right way through repetition, and it's hard, because I know for me, when things are going great, you want to take your foot off the gas, and it's and then next thing you know, your hair's on fire and you're speeding away, and it's about putting your foot on the gas and keeping it going at a constant rate. That's it makes life a lot easier than doing the big peaks and valleys, of waiting to the last minute to file a brief or doing all this other type of stuff. Life gets a whole lot easier when you've got some consistency in it.
Oh, it's amazing how you work so hard to get ready for trial. You get to trial, you get a verdict, favorable verdict, and the first inclination is to relax,
Right.
right? And there goes that accelerator, and all of a sudden you forgot about, oh wait, we got to get a judgment in. We've got to get this agreed to. We've got to get this done so that we can close out the case. We've got to go get reductions in and basically finish things. And I think there's those moments, regardless of what you do in your career or life, right? You get past this big thing that you've been prepping for and you've been working so hard towards, and then you want to just take that breath.
Right.
Which is fine, but you still got to keep going. You can't just completely relax.
Right. Well, and I think the thing is trying to, develop in there, you got to have, self-care too. You've got, especially
100%.
after a hard trial, you got to do something to just kind of take care of yourself and kind of reinvigorate yourself and know, okay, well, what's next? And I know for us, if we get a favorable verdict, we want to just go out and party and carry it on. But then next thing you know, it's like, well, we've been in trial for a week or 2 weeks on a federal case. So it's like, we got to get some new clients in the door. We've got to start doing this, or have you followed up with this? And, this is what's coming up next. But also if, we come in second, we still have got sentencing.
Right.
So we're not done yet. And then maybe there's an appeal and all that, and those procedures and stuff. So no, I get that. It's just like, it's never done. I mean, it's never done. I mean, there's always something.
All right. So you get out of law school, you go start working for a bigger defense firm.
No, actually, it was a small firm.
Okay.
It was Blassingame and Osborne. Ken Blassingame did criminal defense, and then Bob Osborne did the personal injury. And eventually they split, and I went with Bob and did some personal injury and was doing that. And then he merged with another firm, and we were doing some, I like to call sore neck and back cases,
Sure.
right? And I just didn't like it because, at the end of the day, the settlements were not very big, and the client really didn't get much money out of the deal. And I said, I've always wanted to be a criminal defense lawyer, so let me go do that. And so I was, I went out and took a leap of faith and started my own practice. And, that's back when you had to have a yellow page ad, those,
Sure.
and those things were outrageous. And, you went down and picked up court appointments and got the jail list and sent out letters. And but it also taught you that, about meeting other lawyers. And there's a lot of other lawyers out there that, were willing to help. And I tried my first felony case, and I forget what I totally undercharged this guy, but this guy's charged with aggravated assault. But Tom Pappas, who was part of the clinic when I was in it, said, hey, look, if you need anything, let me know. And I had enough sense that I'm getting ready to try this felony case. I'm like, I don't really know what I'm doing, And I go, Tom, I need your help. He goes, yeah, I'll come sit with you. And so he sat with me and made sure I got it done. And so I tried my first felony case, and, with Tom's help, I get a not guilty, right? So I'm like,
Once again,
I'm like, 1-0, I should stop right there because it's only going to get harder after that. But I think I guess my point of this is it demonstrates how important relationships are, because, I met Tom and he, maintained that relationship from law school. He helped me get me through that. And then later on, he said, hey, why don't you come over and work with us? And I did. And as a result of that, I got to work with some great lawyers, Mike Gibson, Richard Anderson, Tom. I sat through some trials with Tom. He's one of the best trial lawyers ever. And I got to learn so much. And as a result, I got board certified earlier than I would have. And so just a great example to work. And that started with a relationship from law school. And it just shows and I'm still friends with them all, even though I don't work there anymore. They're still some of my closest friends and call them for advice all the time. So,
yeah, I think if I would stress anyone, I do stress everyone that comes to work in our office, one of the first things they hear is it is all about relationships. Yep. It doesn't matter if it's clients, if it's doctors, if it's insurance adjusters, if it's defense counsel. It is all about relationships. And part 2 of that is never be a taker.
Right.
Never be a taker. Never be the guy who's going to go and hand out 100 business cards asking for business and never once stop to ask any questions about what the other people do.
Right.
To me, if you can nail down the relationship angle, then you're going to be just fine. And whatever you do,
right,
you're going to be just fine. Putting yourself out there and caring for other people is 90% of any job. 90%, right, in my mind. I just, it drives me nuts when I see people who take advantage of others, never give back, yet are out there wondering, what am I doing wrong? Why can't I get any business?
Right.
And so when you made that leap of faith to go start your own business, you mentioned the Yellow Page ads and whatnot. What was the jumping off point for you? I'm sure a lot of people who listen to this are kind of in that boat of maybe they're not happy where they are, or maybe they've just always wanted to start their own business. What was your jumping off point?
Well, I think it was just I was not satisfied doing personal injury work. I just didn't want to do that, and I just always had a pull to do criminal work and criminal defense work. And so, luckily my wife at the time, she was supportive of that, and and said, yeah, let's go do this. But it was a total leap of faith, because the thing was, I just assumed, because my stepfather was a lawyer, you're a lawyer, you can just start a practice and you can just, next thing you know, the thing's printing money because you have a law degree. But nobody ever taught you the steps you need to do to make that work. I mean, people will come up to me today and say, what's the first thing you need to do to start your own business? I said, get a credit card machine. Back then, you'd get a credit card machine. I said, get a credit card processor. You got to figure out how to get paid, And so, but I think, the interesting thing about business, maybe this answers your question, maybe it doesn't, but I've had more personal growth through running a business to see your shortcomings and your fear about things, about hiring people. But then also the thing is, I'm a nice guy. Well, I don't want to fire somebody, but if they're not helping you, they need to go. So it's like trying to figure out how to get over your own fears and your own insecurities of, I don't want people to not like me, so I'm not going to fire them, or I'm not going to collect this fee because I want to be the nice guy and all that stuff. And, and you look back on it, it's like, it's the classic, if I knew then what I know now, I would have, it would have been like on a spreadsheet or on a whiteboard, here, we're going to do this, we got to do this, we got to do this. I was just flying by the seat of my pants, and it was working. So quote unquote working, over time.
Right.
But it, in hindsight, when you look back on it, it really wasn't, the business really wasn't working. And I think at some point, I got to a point where I was like, I need to get help for a variety of reasons, and so that's the key too, is you have to be willing and have the ego strength to ask for help. I don't,
Absolutely.
I don't know everything. I don't know what I'm doing, and I need someone to help me. And so through the course of, getting help to run the business, and that was probably, 15 years ago. And so I've been practicing law for, almost 20 years, and finally get help to run my business, right?
We're a stubborn breed.
Right, and, it's like, wow, it's working fine. I can pay the bills. But, it was an illusion, because you really sat down and look at the money, and the paying your taxes, I'll figure that out as we go. That's another thing, pay your taxes, so you don't get down that rabbit hole. But it's mindset. I mean, it's so, if they could teach stuff in school or even law school, because they don't teach you any of this stuff in law school, and they don't teach you this in school,
Zero.
and they don't teach you this in elementary school, high school, and all this stuff. It's about mindset, and it's about having, this abundant mentality and this faith that, if I do the right things, that things will work out. And just the simple thing of, like, everyone tells you, the paradigm is always, well, you have to have the money first before you go hire somebody, right? But when you really get into it, it's the classic field of dreams. If you build it, they will come. It's hire the person, and the void will get filled. But you have to have the faith and trust that. But that would have been really nice to know, in the beginning,
Yes.
and to be able to work on that stuff. And so I think that's the underlying theme of anything, is just the mindset. What kind of mindset do you have? Because a lot of the things that I know I grew up with, it's what people told me. Well, that's just the way it is.
That's how it's always been done.
It's always been. We've always done it that way. That's the one thing that drives me nuts. If someone says we've always done it that way, well, maybe that's not the best way, And I'm not I've made so many mistakes running this business over time and everything else, and I'm not here to. But I can say everything I focused on, because I started out with a coach who focused on the parts of of a law firm, marketing, sales, and all that stuff, which was great, and how to build a firm and stuff. But as I did that, he had a coach too, and he talked a lot about mindset. I was like, I got to get my mindset correct, because then the rest of this will be, to me, easier, not easy, but easier with the right mindset. And so, that's been the biggest growth about owning a business and doing all this other type of stuff is just, and so to get back to your starting point, I kind of was like, it was a leap. It was just like blind lead the blind. I mean, I office with 2 other guys. One guy went to law school. Oh yeah, we got space over here. It's at the Wendell Turley building. Signing a lease and, getting a credit card machine, getting a Yellow Page ad and, and so there was a time before they had all these court-appointed lists. Like in Collin County, Judge Copeland in Court 1, when he was doing criminal cases, he'd have certain days where they'd have people come in and you just stand around waiting to get appointed on a case, right? And so then, that's how you build your practice, right? And so, getting back to, being nice to people in relationships, right? A lot of, I saw a lot of lawyers, at the jail treating their court-appointed clients. I mean, just being rude to them and just yelling at them and stuff. And I'm like, what are you doing? Because those court-appointed clients, one, deserve a defense just as much as anybody that's retained, but they help build relationships. And I have gotten more retained business from court-appointed clients that I treated well, who then afterwards came back and said, I want to hire you directly. I don't want to run the luck of getting somebody else.
Right.
Or they told their friends who came and hired you. They told a family member that came and hired you. And so you have these opportunities to build relationships that are right in front of your face. And that's another thing I'll tell, new criminal lawyers. If you're going to do the wheel, treat those people well. It's a beating sometimes because you've got 6 family members calling you all the time. It's like, why haven't you seen Johnny at the jail? But you've got to manage that. But if you do it the right way, you've got a great referral source.
Absolutely.
At the end of the day. And so, I don't know, it's just been such an interesting journey to build a business. But it's all mindset stuff and reading and being open to learning. Because that was the one thing my stepfather told me, which I didn't really, I appreciated at the time, but now I appreciate it a little bit more, he goes, you'll never stop learning as a lawyer, which is true. And we think about that as, the legislature meets every 2 years. Okay, so what crazy stuff are they going to do this year, right? But it's not the law. It's about you're always learning yourself,
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think I heard the best, Judge Rush, right?
Yes.
He said wisdom. He goes, he said something to the effect of wisdom. It's the accumulation of our mistakes, right? Right.
Part 1 wisdom.
Part 1 wisdom,
Yeah.
And
I call that tuition. You got to pay tuition,
right? And so, but also, going back to learning, you learn more from your mistakes than you do your victories. You win a case and you're just like, oh, everything's great.
I did it perfect.
I did it perfect. Yeah. Why mess it up? But if you lose, you actually sit down and think about, okay, is there something I could have done differently? And I think that is where the learning is. But the one thing I want, and the reason why I brought this up too is I would love to get your thoughts about this. I think we do a disservice and I fall prey to this too. Of like, we'd always talk about seconds, the first loser, and all this other type of stuff, right? I think we do our kids a disservice, or children, or society, on this focus on winning, because then I think I've learned more in my failures than I have in my successes, and so, and I've tried to tell my kids, go out and try it. If it doesn't work out, no one's dead. Just go try it. What do you have to lose? And you might learn, oh, I don't like that. Or I could have done that better, so let me try to do that better. And I think we are it seems society's so focused on this winning and fear of failure that people don't try to pursue, their passions, their dreams, or whatever, because they're afraid of failing. Well,
it's really interesting that you brought this up. My daughter, my 8-year-old, is in jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. And this is her first semester on the competition team. And I remember talking to her before her very first competition and before her second competition. She's super nervous. And I asked her, I said, hey, sweetheart, what are you nervous about? She's like, I don't want to lose. And I was like, well, okay. Losing isn't fun, right? I haven't met anybody who enjoys losing. But look at it like this. You're going to get out there, and quite frankly, this is your very first competition ever. You're going up against some girls who have been competing for a while. You probably are going to get beat.
Right.
Right? So that can't be your sole reason for going out there, and whether or not you're going to have fun, and how you evaluate it at the end of the day, because you're probably going to get beat. But look at it like this. If you can come home today with 3 solid takeaways, whether it be a new move, how to get out of a move, and whatever else that you can pull out of this tournament, that's a win.
Right.
And so sure enough, at the end of that tournament, she got hammered. I mean, I think she got choked out in record time in her first match. And then there were several chokeouts and submissions and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was a rough day. There were some tears shed.
Sure.
And afterwards, I said, all right, hey, I am so proud of you. You just did something that the vast majority of the population has never done in their entire lives. You battled someone else. Mm-hmm. And she perked up a little bit. I was like, now tell me, what are your takeaways? Her very first takeaway was, I kind of thought I would just win because I showed up. I thought I'd been working hard, and I thought that meant that I would win.
Right.
And I was like, wow, that's a pretty solid takeaway from an 8-year-old.
Yeah, no, it is. That's good insight.
And then the other 2 takeaways had something to do with some moves. So I got to figure out how to get out of that chokehold, right? Because 3 of the 4 girls I fought got me with the triangle choke. So I got to figure out how to get out of that. But yeah, to your point, I think when our sole focus is on winning and losing, obviously winning is important, right? I'm sure your clients think you winning is important. I know mine do.
Right.
That's super important. But the way that I can present my best self out there and do the best job possible is by taking some chances, by putting myself out there, by continuing to learn. And I'm not going to win everything I try. I'm not. I understand that. And it hurts when I don't.
Right.
But to your point, if we can take those circumstances and we can learn from them and we can put our ego aside, because the temptation when you lose is to just bottle up, that never happened, I don't want to think about it again, right?
Right.
One of the hardest things we have to do is autopsy our failures, right? One of my great friends, Russell Button, he's a plaintiff's lawyer, and he loves the word autopsy. In fact, we had a clerk who sat in on a focus group, and Russell told him that we were going to autopsy it after that, and he literally thought we were going to look at pictures of a dead body afterwards.
Yeah, we use the same phrase. Let's do the autopsy. Later.
Yeah, and the autopsy is not fun to do, right? I mean, there's always good stuff that happens.
Sure.
But it really allows you to learn from your mistakes. Wow, this really didn't go, or I did this really poorly, or wow, that happened and I was completely not expecting that. And so I think to autopsy not only your losses, but your wins too, because just because you win, as we know, that doesn't mean you did it perfectly. You may have just sidestepped a huge manhole or just dumb luck, right?
Yep.
Maybe a juror grabbed onto something, a throwaway line, and that's what won it for you.
That neither lawyer mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Right.
That does happen from time to time. They tend to make up things occasionally. But yeah, I think to your point, taking all of our experiences and evaluating them from multiple different perspectives is huge. And that's not taught.
No.
That isn't. And I think that is a huge disservice. So let's get back to starting a business, because you kind of talked about how you did it, and it was almost 2 different phases, right? And I identify with that because I was the same way. Mm-hmm. That first phase is kind of the getting up the courage to do it, right? Now, a smart person would go do all of their research. They would put together projections, a solid business plan, how they're going to get paid, a plan for growth, a plan for marketing. I was not that smart person.
I wasn't either.
I didn't even know half those things existed, like, right?
Business plan, marketing. What are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly. When
ROI, what's that word?
Yeah, you go to the bank and you want a line of credit, and they're like, okay, what's your business plan? I'm like, what? I plan to make money. Yeah. I don't understand what you mean.
Yeah.
And so there's that kind of first phase, which is the getting the courage to jump off the cliff, and your whole focus is not hitting the ground, right?
Right.
You are trying to keep the thing alive. You're trying to grab some clients any way you can. Typically, there's no organized plan on how to do it. And then eventually, maybe you grab some clients and you start being able to pay some bills. And then you start to grow and you start to get a little overwhelmed. And so you think about hiring someone. And well, what do I need? Well, I need somebody who can do this. So you'll hire somebody, and I have no idea what to pay them. And so then you get to where you're somewhat stabilized, right? You're not drowning, but you're not crushing it either. And then kind of comes phase 2. For some people, to
Right.
your point, you lived in that phase 1 for 15 years.
Right. Yeah.
And that's a very stressful place to live.
Right.
And so at what point was it, did you read something? Did you hear something? Did you talk to somebody when you realize, wait, I'm not doing this right. There's another level that I can step up to really make this thing special.
Well, I think it came down to finally looking at, I was forced to look at my accounts receivables.
Mm.
So, and by looking at it and realizing, in majority of these cases are over, these people are never going to pay you. And it was a significant amount of money, the amount of money I've left on the table over the years by not, sticking to the payment plan, withdrawing from cases. Because there was a part, lawyers would be like, you never withdraw.
Right.
You can't drop them in the grease, right? So you have this mindset of like, you never withdraw, so then they don't pay, you still do the work, and then
For free.
right? And so I was forced to look at that. And so then I realized I need to do something. Because there's not pressure with me, but some external pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I had, actually, it was Dana Palmer had posted something on Collin County Criminal Defense. I have a business coach. And I reached out to Dana and I said, hey, who are you using? And he mentioned this, how to manage a small law firm. And I said, called them up. They said, yeah, we got a seminar starting in 2 days. You want to come? I said, and you're on the phone going, how much is it going to cost? And you're making all these things. And you're like, and they did a good job. I'm like, yep, I'll be there in 2 days. So made flight arrangements to go to Miami, went to the seminar, and started getting a first taste of it. And you doing masterminds and getting exposed to this whole area of the, business and growth that I had never been exposed to, and then kept with it, and have continued to coach ever since. And I think that was in 2011 when that happened. So
I know the first time I kind of was in that area, right? The first, I read a book that really blew my mind, and then being around a seminar like that, it's great legal marketing for me. It was like drinking out of a fire hose. Mm-hmm. These people were on such a different level, and I'm sitting here looking at my practice going, oh my gosh, like I don't have systems. I don't have, the marketing plan, certainly not the way these guys do. I'm thinking, hey, I got a website. It's pretty decent.
Right.
Google pay-per-view and SEO. And I mean, oh my gosh. And then the systems, and then the hiring and the operations and leadership and forecasting and planning and actually running your practice based on data.
Right.
I'm sitting here like, data? I got clients' names and phone numbers, and
right.
I know what we settled cases for, but what other data do you need?
Right.
And so I was mind blown. And there was a moment there where I was like, this is so overwhelming. I almost want to forget like I was even here and just kind of go back to the comfortable of trying to grow it my own way.
Right.
But then there was that part of me that was like, well, hold on now. Ego, fear of comfort. Step aside and let's look deeper into this. And quite frankly, that has been a life-changing decision. So when you made that decision, how did you come to it, and then where did it go from there?
Well, once I, said, hey, I'm going to go to the seminar, and I went and then met some folks there and liked what was going on, because a lot of it was about collecting, just getting paid, and I was like, okay, well, I could do this. And this was a simple first step, but then it led into doing a business plan and all that stuff. And so I kept going. And I remember one day I'm sitting there in this breakout from the program, and we had to come up with a business plan. And it's like, well, how much? And it's figuring out how much money do you need to make, and how many cases do you have, and doing those metrics. It's like
average case value,
and all this other type stuff. So and I had done a lot of court-appointed work, and I enjoy doing it, because you get some cases that you get the difficult cases that people can't afford lawyers, and so you get to try some fun stuff, and they make you a better lawyer. But then I did the math. And I remember this. I had 30 cases, 30 open court-appointed cases out of Collin County, and I was being generous when I said the average case value is $1,000.
Wow.
So I have 30 cases that are going to generate me $30,000 when I could find one federal white-collar case that would probably be at least that, if not more. So that decision got made, and I went upstairs to the hotel and sent an email to the court-appointed list coordinator and said, take me off the list. And so it's about making decisions like that and breaking free of, well, I know I'm going to get paid. I know I'm going to get a check. The county's never bounced a check. I know, but it had its purpose. But if I was going to grow, I needed to get rid of that. And so the next phase now is to not do the federal court-appointed work and just take retained cases. And so, it's just a progression of trying to figure out what I want to do. What am I best at, too? I think that's the part of the process, is that going through it, the two things I enjoy doing are practicing and being a lawyer, and the networking part of it. I mean, I think those are the two things that I think I'm relatively decent at or good at, and I enjoy. But the management system, handling people and all this stuff. So it's trying to figure out who's better suited to do that. Okay, and hiring that person to do that, right?
Who, not how.
Right, yeah. But it's also to understand, too, just because I know how to do something, it's not the best use of my time.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
So, I mean, there was a time I could say, look, I knew how to do an occupational driver's license, and I would put it all together, and I could handle everything by myself, and then I hired someone and let them do it, but I still had to do all that stuff. Now it's like, I don't even touch it. I shouldn't have to deal with it, because it's not the best use of my time and value. It's also about value. So it's a constant progression, too, because then, I'm always refining, what cases are we going to take?
Right.
We're not going to, and we recently made a decision on some cases, we're just not going to take those anymore because they're not there's no value in them, and it doesn't make sense for us to do it. If we're going to focus on becoming, our goals are this, that doesn't serve that goal. And so it's being able to refine it over time. But I think it's also important that I've had help along the way. I've had a coach to help me on and off to be able to say, okay, what's the plan? How do I get there? Because they see things I don't see or can see in me. Hey, I can tell you what's holding you back, or X, Y, and Z, and kind of get to the bottom of that and make that change or find that area of growth you need to work in to keep growing the business.
I think having a business coach is absolutely 100% necessary. It doesn't matter if you're Warren Buffett or anybody else. Like, you need a business coach simply for that reason. A couple of reasons. Accountability.
Right.
Right? Because if you're leading a team, the team is going to hesitate to hold you accountable for the things that you're supposed to be doing. And two, from that different perspective. The other thing that you had mentioned, too, that I think is an absolute mandatory thing that any person should have, regardless of whether you own a business, run a business, whatever role you're in, is a mastermind group. I just got back from Nashville last week, and we had our annual summit there, and then our mastermind group that meets quarterly. And the way ours works is you get up there and you share something that's working for you. You give everybody an update on what's going on with the business, and then you have a couple of asks. And it's funny because, there's probably 20 other law firm owners in this mastermind group. And by the time I get out my ask and answer their follow-up questions, the solution is so clear.
Right.
And people are like, why are you asking us that? Like, come on, you can do better than that. Why are you asking?
The answer.
Easy.
You know the answer.
It's easy. You just need somebody to kick you in the rear to make the decision, right? But I've found that, I'm not the only one. I would say probably 75% of the people that sit up there, by the time they get down, they're like, yeah, that's a no-brainer decision.
Right.
And the other 25%, maybe it's something more complicated. But when you have the different perspectives, and people disagree all the time during those things,
right.
But you're hearing these different perspectives and have the opportunity in, one sitting to hear 5, 6, 7 different perspectives on something that get your mind thinking. Maybe you come up with a completely different solution.
Right.
But just having that input from people who are there to genuinely help you is invaluable.
Right, and I think that's the most important part. People that are generally interested in helping you, because
Yeah,
People think they're trying to help you, but they really have their own self-interest in it. It's not really help.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so I would always caution people on the super cheap masterminds.
Mm-hmm.
Because those tend to be somebody leading them who's just looking to get answers to things and is a taker.
Right.
But yeah, I think having the mastermind group, having the business coach is invaluable. I know that's helped us. That's helped every aspect of our firm. One of the things that we hold most dear is our culture, and that is a huge focus during any time we talk to the coach is culture.
Right.
Also implementing EOS in our business from the book Traction, which we're going to hear from our EOS implementer on the next episode.
Oh, very nice.
So yes, so stay tuned, everyone.
Yeah.
But all right, so James, we are running out of time. That went super fast. Give me favorite book or favorite few books. I know you have several. You're well read.
Yeah. So favorite one, number one, I give to every intern. We do an intern program with the Frisco ISD. Every book, I always give them the Four Agreements by Miguel Don Ruiz. And it's the one. I mean, it's one of those books that you have to read once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, because you're always going to get a different perspective when you read it. And it seems so simple, but it's so hard to implement. But
Simple, not easy.
Simple, not easy. And I think if people took the time to just read that book. Just read it. I think it changed how human beings interact with each other. I mean, if we do that, and also increases more conversation. Think and Grow Rich. I mean, it's a classic. I think if you're in business, you got to read that.
Speaks heavily to mindset.
Yes, heavily mindset. Science of Getting Rich, I think is by Wallace Wattles is a great book. Another one, Untethered Soul, was really kind of a great book that I read, and I need to go back and read that one too. There's so many that I've been exposed to that I would have never been exposed to had I not had a coach and been in these coaching programs to read things like, and then I will say, instead of books, podcast.
Yes.
Rich Roll podcast is the one I listen to religiously, and the book, and that's where I've learned about Angela Duckworth. She was on the podcast. Read her book and Extreme Leadership with Jocko Willink, and that book. So went and got that book and stuff. That's a wonderful podcast about everything: nutrition, transformation. A lot of people who've been addicts who've resurrected their lives, convicts, everything else. It's a wonderful look into human beings, and I learned so much from it. I think, besides books, that's one of the best podcasts out there.
It's funny, since I kind of entered the phase 2, rarely am I in the car just listening to music anymore. Rarely am I sitting at home just watching TV. I'm guilty of having some football on, but a lot of times I may be sitting there with the football game on, just thinking about, business or issues or whatnot. And then when I'm in the car, I subscribe to Scribd, SCRIBD. It's like $10 a month, and tons of Audible books on there. You can also download books, magazines, things like that. So that would be my recommendation for today. Okay. But yes, always be learning.
Yeah, always be learning. And there's so much out there, and there's so much science, but there's also, and we could do a whole hour on this too, is about spirituality. I mean, they intersect with each other all the time. It's about faith, and it doesn't really matter what you believe in. You just got to believe there's faith in something. And the other thing I would say is that the one thing I've learned too, and my coach just says this all the time, our greatest power is our power of choice. And, we get to choose how we want to show up each and every day. And the thought I had was like, if someone says, you made me mad. Well, nobody makes you mad. You choose to be mad. And I think that's the ability that we have. And if for me to understand, I do have the power to choose who I hang out with, who I spend my time with, how I build my business, what I do and what I don't do. That if everybody figured that out, and not, it'd be amazing what everybody's life would be like if we just embrace that type thing.
To that point, the book Essentialism, after I read that, I tried a little task, little project, where I tried to hear every time I said I have to do something, and try to change it to I get to do something. So instead of leaving the office, I got to go meet James for the podcast. Hey, I get to go meet James for the podcast.
Right.
And it's amazing what just paying attention to that does to your mindset, to your day, to your rhythm. Just feeling like, hey, I get to go do this now. I get to go do this. Right. I have this coming up that I get to go do. And so, yeah, I think that's amazing. So, James, thank you so much for being here. Really enjoyed it. And we will talk to you again, no doubt.
All right. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it. It's great. Thanks, Scott.
All right, you bet. Bye.